The street was filled with honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the smell of hot asphalt. In the middle of all that everyday noise, a man walked with a tight brow and a hardened stare. Enrique Vasconcelos, owner of one of the country's biggest tech companies, moved as if the world were too small for the size of his problems. He talked loudly on the phone, annoyed, complaining, as if every little thing around him existed only to ruin his day. "I already said I don't want excuses. I want results," he growled, ending the call and shoving the phone into his pocket with force. It was one of those days when nothing seemed under control. His employees had let him down. The board was pushing him. The media whispered about a supposed financial crisis, and to make things worse, he was almost 2 hours late for an important meeting. Everything inside him felt like a volcano ready to burst. Enrique adjusted his suit, took a deep breath, and kept walking down the crowded sidewalk, ignoring everything and everyone, until something, or rather someone, made him stop. A woman was sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, her hair messy, and her clothes covered in dust, holding a small cardboard sign. A homeless woman, but there was something different about her. It wasn't just the posture or the expression. It was the way she watched people, without begging, without holding out her hand, without pleading. She only observed, like someone trying to survive her own silence. An elderly man stopped in front of her. His hands trembled, and he carried a bag of bread under his arm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrinkled 10-real bill. Without fuss, he handed it to her. The homeless woman took the money gently, as if it were more than cash, as if it were a piece of humanity. And then something happened that pulled Enrique out of his bubble of arrogance. She didn't smile, didn't thank him with exaggeration, didn't jump up happily. She simply looked at the bill as if she had been given a mission. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into the inner pocket of her worn-out jacket. That stirred both curiosity and judgment in the millionaire. "Here we go," he thought. 10 reais straight into booze, cigarettes or drugs. Always the same story. But contrary to everything he imagined, she stood up with a small effort, adjusted the cloth bag she carried, and began to walk. She didn't stumble. She didn't behave like Enrique expected. She walked with intention, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. For some reason he couldn't even explain, he chose to follow her. It wasn't compassion. It wasn't worry. It was suspicion. And maybe a bit of boredom mixed with arrogance. The idea that he was about to confirm yet another of his beliefs about people who don't want anything from life. He walked a few steps behind her, keeping distance, watching each move. The homeless woman turned the corner, passed a newsstand, avoided puddles, and greeted the owner of a coffee cart with a simple nod. No one seemed afraid of her. No one stepped away. It was as if she were part of the scenery, invisible, yet present. Enrique felt the strange sensation that for the first time in a long while, he wasn't the one in charge. He was tracking someone who had no idea who he was, someone carrying 10 reais as if it were a secret. The woman picked up her pace and entered a narrow street where a small neighborhood market stood. Enrique frowned. "It's starting," he muttered, ready to validate all his prejudgments. But before she went inside, he noticed something that made him stop. She looked at the entrance, breathed deeply and discreetly wiped her eyes, like someone about to do something difficult. Enrique stepped back without even knowing why. Something about her felt different, something he didn't understand, something that began to get under his skin, and in that exact moment, his curiosity became obsession. What would a homeless woman do with 10 reais that made her breathe like she carried the weight of the world? Now everything depended on what she did inside. The little bell on the market door chimed softly as she entered. The sound didn't match the heavy mood Enrique carried in his chest. He stopped outside, staring through the foggy window, like someone spying on a scene they shouldn't watch but couldn't turn away from. Inside, the woman walked slowly through the narrow aisle. The market was simple but tidy. Old shelves, worn floors, flickering fluorescent lights. a portrait of an ordinary life Enrique rarely crossed paths with. It felt like stepping into another universe, where 10 reais actually mattered, where small choices could affect an entire day. She looked at the shelves, as if doing mental math. Each item seemed to demand a hard decision. Enrique folded his arms, certain that at any moment she would grab cheap booze or cigarettes. But no. The first thing she picked up was a warm bread roll, freshly placed in the basket. She pressed it lightly with her fingers, testing the softness, and put it in the cart. Enrique raised an eyebrow. Bread? Just that? She'll grab a beer can next. But the woman didn't head toward the drink aisle. She walked to the back where a small fridge display stood. She stared at the items for a long moment. Yogurt cups, little juice bottles, butter, then looked away, as if each product were a luxury she simply couldn't afford, until she stopped in front of a shelf with loose fruits. She picked up a small red apple, not perfect but decent. She turned it in her hands, checking every side. Then she placed it in the cart with the same care someone uses when putting down something fragile. Enrique frowned. Bread and an apple. Still missing the bad habits, let's see. But the homeless woman didn't seem in any hurry. She walked toward the register. That's when Enrique noticed something that disarmed him a bit. She opened the inside pocket of her jacket and unfolded the 10 real bill with care, as if that note were the last valuable thing she had in her life. Just this? The cashier asked, surprised by the simple purchase. She nodded. Yeah, just this. Want it in a bag? She hesitated. If you can, I need everything to stay whole. The sentence caught the cashier's attention, but he didn't ask anything. He handed her the bag. The woman held the apple as if she were protecting something precious. Enrique stayed outside, hiding behind a pillar, watching everything like some amateur detective. Or maybe like someone who, for the first time ever, was on the edge of discovering something he couldn't explain with numbers, spreadsheets, or business logic. When the woman stepped out, carrying the bread and the apple in the bag, she didn't look sad or happy. She looked determined, as if she had a route, a destination, a purpose. She turned right and began walking faster. Enrique followed her. But what is all this for? He muttered, irritated by his own confusion. Where are you going? With each block she seemed to walk with more urgency. She crossed a small plaza, avoided a group of teenagers, crossed the street looking both ways carefully, showing no impulsive behavior at all. Nothing about her matched the stereotype Enrique was so sure he understood. Then she stopped. At the edge of a simple residential street, there was an abandoned lot. Rusty cans, bits of wood, tall weeds. And among all of that, a small shadow curled up. A child. Enrique froze. The woman took a breath, walked toward the little figure and pulled the bread from the bag. I brought it, sweetheart, she said softly, her voice trembling. The child lifted her face, dirty, thin, cheeks hollow. But the moment she saw the bread, a sparkle appeared. Enrique felt his stomach drop. The homeless woman broke the bread with her hands and gave the biggest piece to the child, who devoured it like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Then she took the apple, wiped it on her own shirt, and handed it to the girl. That's when Enrique noticed something he didn't expect. The woman didn't eat anything. Nothing. Not a crumb. Everything she bought was for someone else. Enrique stood there, overtaken by a feeling he hadn't recognized in years, discomfort, followed by shame. And one question began echoing inside him. Why did she do that? Who is this child? And why didn't she eat anything, even though she was clearly starving? There was something much bigger hidden there, and Enrique needed to know. He couldn't look away. The girl ate with a mix of desperation and relief, while the woman, the same homeless woman he'd been following, watched her with a care that looked almost maternal, but also with a sadness that hurt just to witness. It was obvious she was hungry too. Her stomach even growled, and Enrique heard it, yet she stayed firm, refusing to put anything in her mouth. He moved a bit closer, trying to understand better, but stayed behind a fallen concrete column, close enough to watch without being seen. Eat slow, or it might make you sick, the woman whispered, brushing a strand of hair out of the girl's face. The child nodded, mouth full, like she was being cared for by the only person in the world who still looked after her. Enrique folded his arms. That small gesture shook him in ways he didn't expect. It was like watching a life that completely contradicted the stereotype he had already prepared in his head. He expected addiction, laziness, running away. He didn't expect sacrifice. After a few minutes, the girl bit into the apple. Her eyes shut as if it were the best thing she had tasted in months. "It's sweet," she murmured. The woman smiled, a small, tired but real smile. "I figured you'd like it." The girl stopped eating and looked up, worried. "You're not going to eat anything." The woman shook her head. "I'm not hungry right now." It was a lie, and Henrique knew it. It wasn't an innocent, "I'm not hungry." It was the, "I can't eat because you need it more," from someone who had already learned how to hide her own needs. The girl insisted, "You said yesterday you were dizzy." The woman looked away for a moment, as if gathering strength. "I'm fine now, Angel. You eat. We'll deal with the rest later." Enrique felt something tighten inside him, a kind of discomfort that wasn't physical. It was moral. She spent everything to buy food for this kid, 10 reais, and didn't keep even a crumb for herself. He thought he was there to confirm a vice, irresponsibility, self-destruction, but he was discovering the opposite, a woman who, even living on the streets, put someone else before herself. The girl finished the bread and apple. The girl tugged on the hem of the woman's shirt. "Are you staying with me today, right?" The woman drew in a long breath and looked away again. I'll see. It depends." The girl pressed her lips together, afraid of the answer. "You always say that." The woman closed her eyes for a second, as if the sentence had hit the exact place where it hurt the most. Henrique watched everything, stunned. That wasn't the behavior of someone lost. It was the behavior of someone fighting against herself, against her own fate, against something bigger than she was. The girl put the apple core inside an old container made from a reused bottle cap. "To plant it later," she explained, looking at the woman. "Like you said, right, that everything that grows slowly becomes strong." The woman smiled with watery eyes. "That's right. Everything that grows slowly becomes strong." Henrique remained perfectly still. "She teaches. She protects. She cares. Who on earth is this woman?" He took a breath, trying to line up his thoughts. Why? Why is she doing this? What's the story behind all of this? But the truth was about to show up, and he wasn't ready. The girl finished eating and hugged the woman tightly as if she refused to let go. "Promise you'll come back today." The woman froze, caught between the truth and the need to shield the girl. I promise I'll try." The girl nodded sadly, but she believed her. When the child returned to the little spot where she slept, the woman waited a few seconds, then walked away, quickly wiping a stubborn tear. Henrique noticed the pain hidden in that gesture, but he also noticed something else. The child wasn't her daughter, yet she cared for her as if she were, and that flipped everything upside down. Henrique stepped back, feeling the ground disappear for a moment. He wasn't following a homeless woman. He was following someone carrying a mission, one far too heavy to be spoken out loud. And right before she turned the corner, he heard her whisper to herself, "Just one more day. Please, just one more day." It was desperate, it was intimate, and Henrique understood he was standing in the middle of something far deeper. The question changed completely. Who is this woman, and what is she running from? The woman hurried away, walking fast as if she were afraid to look back and end up staying. The cold afternoon wind lifted the edge of her worn jacket, revealing thin arms covered in old bruises, scars that told stories no one had ever bothered to ask about. Henrique hesitated for a few seconds. He didn't know exactly what pushed him: curiosity, outrage, or the strange feeling that her story couldn't just end there. He inhaled deeply and did something he never imagined. He approached her. "Hey!" he called out, still keeping enough distance not to seem threatening. "Hold on a second." The woman spun around instantly, startled like a trapped animal. Her eyes, once gentle with the girl, were now sharp, ready for danger. "I don't have anything to give you," she said, firm, blunt, like someone who learned to defend herself before learning how to breathe. Henrique raised his hands, showing he wasn't carrying anything besides his own curiosity. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want to talk." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Talk? A guy in a suit wants to talk to me?" She narrowed her eyes. "You thinking I'm going to do crazy stuff for a few coins?" The accusation hit him like a slap. Henrique felt his pride flare. "Hey, relax, that's not it. I just saw what you did back there, and—" "Saw what?" She cut him off, harsh. "I didn't do anything." It was unbelievable how in seconds the woman who treated the girl with such tenderness could turn into a wall of concrete. Every word sounded rehearsed by years of survival. "You bought food for her," Henrique said plainly, "and you didn't keep anything for yourself. I just wanted to understand." She narrowed her eyes, studying him like someone trying to decide if he was a real danger or just another bothersome stranger. "That's none of your business." She started to walk away, but Henrique took 2 quick steps forward. "Wait, that girl, is she your daughter?" The woman stopped. 1 second, 2. Long enough for Henrique to notice the open wound. She turned slowly but didn't answer. "Why are you following me?" she demanded, gaze sharp as glass. Henrique opened his mouth, but realized he didn't even know how to explain it, because nothing made sense. Because she shattered every belief he had about people living on the streets. Because he felt ashamed of everything he assumed. Because that moment shook him in a way he couldn't rationalize. But he couldn't say any of that. I was just curious. That's all that came out." She laughed, a bitter, empty laugh. "Curious?" she repeated. "Do you think I'm some kind of circus act? That my life is entertainment for bored rich people?" Henrique swallowed hard. She was furious. And she was right. "That's not it," he insisted. "I just saw you didn't eat anything, and that girl, she clearly depends on you." Her eyes flickered for a moment. A spark of pain, of guilt, of shame. But like a door slamming shut, she sealed everything with coldness. "I already told you. It's none of your business." Henrique stepped closer. "I can help." She stared at him like he had just said the most offensive thing imaginable. "Help?" she repeated, her voice shaking with anger. "Tell me something, sir. Where were you when I lost everything? Where were you when I slept 3 nights in the rain with a fever? Where were you when they kicked me from doorway to doorway like I was trash?" Henrique didn't move. "Where were you when that little girl nearly starved to death?" she whispered, as if unloading a secret she'd been holding for far too long. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "That's what I thought," she finished, turning her back on him. "People like you only show up when you want to feel like heroes for 5 minutes." She started walking, determined to disappear, but Henrique felt that if he let her go now, he'd lose something important, something he couldn't explain yet, but couldn't ignore. He took a few steps after her. "If you don't want help, at least tell me your name." She stopped, took a deep breath, and without turning around, answered softly, "My name doesn't matter to you." Then she vanished around the corner, leaving Henrique standing there, confused, unsettled, and more determined than ever to find out who she was, because there was a truth hiding behind those wounded eyes, a truth too big to ignore, and he had just decided he wouldn't rest until he uncovered it. Henrique hurried, trying to catch her again, but she had already crossed the street and slipped out of sight among cars, poles, and shadows. He looked around, irritated, not at her, but at the feeling that he was losing something he needed to understand. He turned one corner, then another, until finally he spotted her on the opposite sidewalk, crouching beside a man lying on the ground, a homeless man, old, shaking, eyes shut, breathing unevenly. The woman approached him urgently, as if she knew him. Henrique watched from a distance, stuck between curiosity and the growing discomfort she made him feel. "Mr. Arlindo," she called, touching his shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" The man didn't react. Pale, sweating, breathing too fast. Henrique frowned. She knows this guy. The woman opened her fabric bag and pulled out, Not medicine, not food, not blankets, but a small metal tin, old, dented, clearly used many times. Inside it were bits of improvised first aid supplies, gauze, alcohol, strips of clean cloth, a folded emergency blanket. Enrique blinked. She placed her hand on the man's neck, counted seconds silently, checked his breathing. "He's got a fever again," she murmured, worried, "and he hasn't taken anything since yesterday." Enrique stepped forward, impressed. "She knows what she's doing." The homeless woman turned the man on his side, lifted his head slightly, using her bag as support, and began wiping his forehead with a damp cloth. These weren't random movements. It wasn't guesswork. It was technique. It was training. It was someone who knew exactly what risk she was facing. Enrique stood behind her, not wanting to interrupt, but unable to walk away. "He needs care," he said quietly. She didn't even glance at him. "They've called 3 times this week," she replied through clenched teeth. "Nobody came." Enrique felt something twist inside him, justice or anger. "He's diabetic," she continued. "His temperature spikes, he gets dizzy, and he's been fainting a lot. He needs medical supervision, but—" She sighed. "For people living on the street, fever is never an emergency, right?" Enrique watched carefully, the way she massaged the back of the man's neck to improve circulation, how she wrapped the thermal blanket to warm him gradually, how she spoke softly, calming him. "Don't sleep now, okay? Stay with me." She was harsh, suspicious, defensive, but in the face of someone else's suffering, she became a different person entirely. The contrast was brutal. Enrique couldn't hold it in. "Are you a nurse?" he asked. She froze. Her hand stopped for a second, then she answered almost in a whisper, "It doesn't matter what I used to be." Enrique felt his stomach tighten. She went on, "What matters is what I can still do right now." She helped the man drink a few sips of water, took off her worn jacket and placed it over him, even though she was shivering herself. Enrique stared, stunned. She's trained. She knows how to save people. What is someone like her doing on the streets? Why? The question echoed louder and louder inside him. The man opened his eyes slowly, mumbling something. "Easy, Mr. Arlindo. Breathe with me." She put her hand on his chest. "Like this. Slow." Enrique stepped closer. "I can call an ambulance," he said. She let out a quick, dry laugh. "They don't come. I can make them come," Enrique insisted. She looked at him, exhausted, but with that same hard pride as before. "And why would you do that?" Enrique hesitated, because he had no logical reason. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said, almost surprised he'd said it. She looked away, unconvinced. "You think I don't see when someone's just trying to ease their guilty conscience?" Enrique swallowed. Was she right? Maybe. But something inside him screamed it was more than that. He grabbed his phone, called a specific contact. "Dr. Mauricio, I need a private ambulance in the North District now." "Help?" she repeated, her voice tight with anger. "Tell me something, sir. Where were you when I lost everything? Where were you when I slept 3 nights in the rain with a fever? Where were you when they slammed doors in my face like I was garbage?" Enrique didn't move. "Where were you when that little girl almost died from hunger?" she whispered, spilling a truth she had held in her chest for too long. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "That's what I thought," she finished, turning her back. "People like you only show up when you want to feel like a hero for 5 minutes." She started walking, determined to vanish from sight. But Enrique felt that if he walked away now, he'd lose something important, something he didn't understand yet, but couldn't ignore. He followed after her. "If you don't want help, at least tell me your name." She stopped, breathed in, and without turning around, said quietly, "My name doesn't matter to you." Then she disappeared around the corner, leaving Enrique standing there, confused, disturbed, and more determined than ever to find out who she was. Because behind those wounded eyes there was a truth too big to ignore, and he had just decided he wouldn't rest until he uncovered it. Enrique picked up his pace, trying to catch her again, but she had already crossed the street and vanished among cars, shadows, and streetlights. He looked everywhere, frustrated, not with her, but with the feeling he was losing something he needed to understand. He turned one corner, then another, until he finally spotted her across the street, kneeling beside a man lying on the sidewalk. A homeless man, old, shaking, eyes closed, breath weak. The woman approached him with urgency, as if she knew him. Enrique watched from afar, caught between curiosity and the growing discomfort she stirred in him. "Mr. Arlindo," she called, touching his shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" The man didn't react, pale, sweating, breathing too fast. Enrique frowned. She knows him. The woman opened her cloth bag and pulled out, not medicine, not food, not blankets, but a small metal tin, dented, old, clearly used many times. Inside it were improvised first aid supplies, gauze, alcohol, clean cloth strips, a folded thermal blanket. Enrique blinked. She touched the man's neck, counted silently, checked his breathing. "He's got a fever again," she murmured, "and he hasn't taken anything since yesterday." Enrique stepped closer, impressed. She knows exactly what she's doing. The homeless woman turned the man onto his side, lifted his head using her bag as support, and began cooling his forehead with a damp cloth. These weren't random movements, not some guesswork. It was technique, training, someone who knew the danger. Enrique stood behind her, not wanting to interrupt, but unable to leave. "He needs medical care," Enrique said. She didn't even look at him. "They were called 3 times this week," she muttered. No one came. Enrique felt something twist inside him, anger or justice. "He's diabetic," she continued. "Has temperature swings, dizziness, keeps blacking out. He needs a doctor, but—" She exhaled. "For anyone living on the street, fever isn't an emergency, right?" Enrique watched, how she massaged the back of his neck to help circulation, how she wrapped the thermal blanket to warm him slowly, how she whispered calmly to him, "Don't sleep, okay? Stay with me." She was tough, suspicious, defensive, but the moment she saw someone in pain, she turned into a completely different person. The contrast was brutal. Enrique couldn't hold it anymore. "Are you a nurse?" he asked. She froze. Her fingers stopped midair. Then she answered in a near whisper, "It doesn't matter what I used to be." Enrique felt a knot in his stomach. She continued, "What matters is what I can still do now." She helped the man take a few sips of water, then took off her own torn jacket to cover him, even though she was shivering. Enrique stared, stunned. She's trained. She's saved lives before. What is she doing on the streets? Why? The question echoed like a siren inside him. The man opened his eyes slightly and murmured something. "Easy, Mr. Arlindo. Breathe with me." She placed a hand on his chest. "Like this, slow." Enrique stepped closer. "I can call an ambulance," he said. She laughed, short and bitter. "They don't come." "I can make them come," Enrique insisted. She stared at him, exhausted, with that same stubborn pride. "And why would you do that?" Enrique hesitated, because he didn't have a logical answer. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said, almost surprised at himself. She looked away, unconvinced. "You think I don't know when someone just wants to quiet a guilty conscience?" Enrique swallowed. Maybe she was right. But everything inside him screamed this was more. He lifted his phone, called someone directly. "Dr. Mauricio, I need a private ambulance in the North District. Now." She turned her head slowly, surprised for the first time. Enrique continued, "Yes, it's urgent. Bring a full team. I'll cover all costs." When he hung up, the woman stared at him differently. It wasn't kindness, it wasn't gratitude, but it was something close to recognition. "They're coming?" she asked, barely believing it. "They are," he replied. She looked at the old man, took a deep breath. She looked relieved, but also terrified. And then she finally said, "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." It was the first truly gentle word she'd said to him. Enrique felt a strange weight in his chest, because he knew if she could care for someone like that. She had saved many people before and lost even more. The mystery around her grew. And now the question that hurt the most was, what happened to this woman, for someone so capable to fall so far? The private ambulance arrived in just over 15 minutes, but for the woman, and even for Henrique, it felt like forever. While they waited, she kept monitoring the old man, shielding him from the thin drizzle starting to fall. With every drop hitting the ground, Henrique noticed how fast the temperature was dropping. When the ambulance finally pulled up, lights flashing, Henrique expected relief in her face, but he didn't see that. She stepped back, 2 steps, shrinking as if she had seen a ghost. The paramedics got out. "Good afternoon," one said. "Who called?" Henrique raised his hand. "I did. He's burning up. Possible hypoglycemia. She was caring for him." The paramedic turned to the woman. She looked away, pulling her jacket tight as if wanting to disappear. "Thank you for helping, ma'am. What's your name?" She froze. Henrique saw terror swell in her eyes. Not shame, fear, real fear, deep fear. The paramedic tried again. "Do you have any contact for his family? Anything that can help?" I can't," she whispered, backing away. "Can't what?" he asked. She turned to leave. Henrique stepped forward instinctively. "Wait! They only want to help." She looked at him with a raw pain that punched the air out of his chest. "I can't be in any record," she whispered. Henrique felt a chill climb up his spine. She started walking away, each step filled with urgent fear. The paramedics placed the man on the stretcher while one wrote down notes. Henrique looked at the man being taken away, then at the woman disappearing into the dark street. The choice was clear: follow his old life or follow her. He followed her. The rain fell harder. The woman walked fast, almost running, as if every drop reminded her how little time she had left. The city felt colder, greyer, emptier. The wind cut like blades. Henrique struggled to keep up. "Hey!" he shouted. "Why did you run? They just wanted to help." She kept walking. "Leave me alone!" she yelled back. Henrique sped up, even soaked, exhausted, starving. She was fast. She moved like someone who had run from many things before. Finally, she slipped into an alley. A dark, narrow alley full of graffiti and damp air. Henrique hesitated, but entered. Inside, she was crouched behind a trash container, shaking from cold, but mostly from fear. He approached slowly. "What's going on?" he asked, voice calm. "You helped a child. You helped an old man. You saved both. Why are you so afraid of being seen?" She lifted her face, tears mixed with rain. "Because," she took a breath, words stumbling, "because if I show up in any record, they will find me." Henrique froze. "They? Who?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, desperate. "Oh, it doesn't matter. They'll find me. And if they find me—" She swallowed hard. "The girl is in danger." Henrique's heart sped up. "That child, she is your daughter, isn't she?" The woman's eyes widened. "No," she said sharply. "She's not my daughter, but—" Her voice cracked. "But she's the only thing I managed to save." Henrique stepped closer. "Save from what?" She looked straight into his eyes. For the first time there was no anger, no pride, no accusation, only despair. "From the same fate I had." The sentence echoed through the alley like a ripped-out confession. Henrique felt his chest tighten. The wind rattled the loose metal around them. "You ran from someone?" he asked. She stayed silent for long seconds before whispering, "I ran from a man who destroyed everything in my life, my home, my career, my peace, and almost took the life of a child I knew." Henrique didn't breathe. She continued, voice breaking, "I left my house with nothing. No documents, no future, just the clothes on my back. I knew that if I went to the streets, no one would look for me there, and I could protect the girl, far away from him." Henrique covered his mouth, stunned. Suddenly everything made sense. The scars, the fear of the ambulance, the refusal to give her name, the constant running, the instinct to care for anyone in pain, the vigilance. Her gaze, that constant, sharp, restless gaze, finally made sentido. Her life wasn't misery. It was camouflage. "Você passou por tudo isso sozinha?" Henrique asked, his voice low, trying not to show the anger boiling inside him. She gave a bitter smile. "Not alone. Some people on the street helped me stay alive, but he might still be looking, and if he finds me—" She inhaled deeply, fighting not to collapse. "I won't let him touch that girl, not ever. I'd rather die first." Enrique felt something he hadn't felt in years. Real anger, real indignation. A sudden burning urge for justice. He stepped closer, determined. "Tell me who he is." Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. This man is dangerous. You have no idea who you're messing with." Enrique clenched his teeth. "Then help me understand." She trembled, not just from cold, but from the fear of trusting someone again. But in that narrow alley, soaked, shaking, exhausted, something shifted in her eyes. A faint recognition that maybe, she didn't have to fight alone this time. The truth was about to surface, and Enrique already knew there was no turning back, because now a new question burned inside him. What did that man do to her? And how could Enrique stop it from happening again? The rain fell harder, the drops cracking against the pavement like tiny explosions. The woman breathed fast, torn between running like she had done 1,000 times, or for the first time in years, staying. Enrique saw the conflict in her eyes, not simple fear, trauma, memory. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, stepping slowly, carefully. "Let me understand what's going on. I can help you better if I know what you're running from." She rubbed her wet face, mixing rain with tears. Her lips trembled. "No one can help me," she whispered. "Not after everything." Enrique shook his head. "Someone can. And today, that someone is me." She closed her eyes tightly, as if that sentence had unlocked a door she'd spent years trying to keep shut. Then, slowly, she began to speak. "I used to have a normal life," she said, lowering herself to the damp ground, too weak to stand. "I wasn't rich, my life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I was a nursing technician, worked in a small hospital, was respected, did my job well. I was calm, until I met the wrong man." Enrique crouched beside her, close but not touching, giving her all his attention. "He was charming," she continued. "On the outside, polite, full of promises. He looked like someone who wanted to build a life with me. But when he realized I wouldn't bend to everything he wanted, he changed. First jealousy, then insults, then shoving, and then—" She swallowed hard. "Until the day he almost killed me." Enrique shut his eyes for a moment, holding back the rage rising like fire in his chest. Her voice shook even more. "I reported him, did everything right, but he had friends in the right places. The kind of people who never believed the woman. They called me hysterical, said I was exaggerating. He walked out of the police station laughing, and I walked out scared." A tear slid quietly down her cheek. A week later, he showed up at the hospital. "He wasn't there for me. He was there for another target." Enrique frowned. "Another woman?" She shook her head. "No, a child." Enrique's heart kicked in his chest. "The girl you protect?" She looked directly at him, and in her eyes was an apology for what she was about to say. "No, the girl in the empty lot isn't her. The child he almost killed died." Enrique froze, literally froze. "I tried to save her," she whispered, her voice tearing the air. "I did chest compressions until my fingers bled. I screamed for help. I begged, but she didn't come back." Enrique pressed a hand to his chest, the pain of her words hitting him like a blow. She continued, crying openly now. "I watched that child's mother collapse on the floor. I heard her scream, a scream that I still hear when I sleep. And it was all his fault. He was mixed up with traffickers, dirty money, dangerous people. The girl died in the middle of a fight he started. And when they realized I knew too much, he came after me." Enrique couldn't breathe. "I had to run," she said. "He swore he'd finish me, and I believed him, because that man doesn't threaten. He does. So I left everything, my documents, my house, my job, my life. I became that nobody." She hugged her arms, shaking from head to toe. "I starved, froze, got humiliated, but one day I found another girl, another child, alone, abandoned. And I saw the same fear in her eyes that I saw in the child who died. I couldn't walk away. I swore I'd protect her, that this time would be different. Even with nothing, even being nobody, I could be her shield. The rain kept falling, but now it felt like background noise lost beneath the weight of her confession. Enrique had never felt so small, so unaware of how brutal the world could be, so crushed by a truth he couldn't ignore. "That's why you won't give your name," he said quietly. She nodded. "If I show up in any record, if my name enters any system, he'll find me. And if he finds me, the girl dies." She shook her head slowly. "I can't risk that. I'd rather die first." Enrique ran a hand through his hair, completely shaken. He had thought he was dealing with someone disorganized, lost, without direction. But now he finally saw the woman in front of him for what she truly was: a survivor, a protector, a guardian of a child who wasn't even hers, a woman shattered, yet somehow still strong enough to save lives, even strangers on the street. Enrique felt his throat tighten, his eyes burn, and for the first time in years he cried, not out of weakness, not out of pity, but out of the weight of everything she had carried alone. She stared at him, confused. "Why are you crying?" Enrique swallowed hard. "Because," his voice cracked, "because no one should carry all of that alone." She looked away, unable to believe what she was hearing. Enrique stepped closer. "I'm going to help you," he said, with a certainty that surprised even himself. "I don't care who this man is. I don't care what you need. You're not fighting alone anymore. You're not running alone. You're not protecting that girl alone." She closed her eyes as if the words had been a blow straight to her chest. "Don't promise things you can't keep," she whispered. Enrique placed a hand over his heart. "I keep everything I promise." And in that dark alley, soaked in rain, surrounded by fear and pain, something shifted forever. Enrique stopped being an observer and became part of her fight. The question was no longer who she was. The new question was, how would he save both of them, the woman hanging by a thread and the girl whose life depended on her? The alley was silent, except for the rain dripping from the rooftops into puddles. Their conversation had opened wounds too deep to ignore. And now, for the first time, Enrique felt a responsibility that had nothing to do with money, business, or power, but with conscience. The woman wiped her face, took a shaky breath, and tried to pull herself together. Enrique noticed she was about to run again. "Hey," he said, stepping forward. "Don't go, not tonight. You and that girl are in danger. Let me help." She shook her head quickly. "I can't. If you get involved, he might go after you too." Enrique gave a weak smile. "Believe me, dangerous people have tried to bring me down before. I'm not that easy to scare." She let out a humorless laugh, a bitter sound crushed by reality. "You don't know who he is," she repeated, almost begging him to stop. But it was useless, because something inside Enrique had cracked. His arrogance, his pride, his feeling of invulnerability. He had seen her pain, he had heard her truth, and nothing could make him walk away now. He breathed deeply. "Where is the girl right now?" Her reaction was instant. "No, I'm not taking you to her." "You think I'd hurt her?" he asked, offended. "That's not it," she said. "It's just, if someone is following you, or me, they'll find her." Enrique froze, thought about it. It was a solid point. "Then at least tell me if she's safe." She hesitated. "She is, for now." Enrique didn't like that pause, or that "for now." But before he could insist, a sound cut through the alley. Footsteps, heavy, wet, slow. The woman froze. Enrique turned his head. A large figure appeared at the mouth of the alley. The woman backed away instantly, panic flooding her face. "No, no, no," she whispered, barely audible. "It can't be." Enrique moved closer to her. "Who is that?" She didn't answer, but the terror in her eyes was answer enough. The man stepped fully into the alley, huge, broad shoulders, unshaven, dead, cold eyes. His leather jacket dripped with rain. He looked like someone pulled straight out of a nightmare, out of the very past she had tried to bury. His voice came out deep and dragging. "I found you." She collapsed to her knees. Enrique froze for a second, just one. When the man advanced, Enrique stepped forward and placed his body between them. "Enough," Enrique said. "You're not touching her." The man laughed, a low, heavy sound that echoed like thunder. "Move, rich boy. This has nothing to do with you." "It does now," Enrique replied tightly. The brute walked up to him face to face. Enrique was tall, but this man was a monster. "Last chance," he growled. "Move." Enrique didn't move. Behind him, the woman was trembling so hard she could barely breathe. The man shoved Enrique violently. Enrique stumbled, almost fell, but caught himself and stood again, eyes locked. Then Enrique did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone. "I don't know who you are," he said with chilling calm, "but you're stupid enough to think there aren't cameras on this street." The man tensed. Enrique continued, "You touch her, and I'll make sure your face is everywhere. The police, the news, whoever wants it, including the people you're probably scared of." The man narrowed his eyes. Enrique lifted his phone, camera on. "Go on," he said. "Try it." The air turned dense. The tension pressed on their skin like weight. Behind him, the woman covered her mouth, terrified of the blood she expected to see next. He stepped toward her, until the man took a step back. Not because he feared Enrique, but because he was smart enough not to create more witnesses. "This isn't over," he growled, pointing a thick finger at the woman. "You can't run from me forever. I always find you." Then he glared at Enrique with pure hatred. "And you have no idea what you just walked into." Enrique didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. The man walked out of the alley slowly, the kind of slow that promised he would return. When his footsteps finally faded, the woman collapsed. Enrique rushed to her. "Hey, hey! He's not touching you," he said, kneeling beside her. "You shouldn't have done that," she sobbed. "You don't know what he's capable of." Enrique held her shoulders steady, firm. "I know what you've already survived," he said, "and that's enough for me to make sure nothing like it ever happens again." She stared at him, devastated, frightened, and unable to believe him. He kept going. "I'm not letting you die by that man's hands. I'm not letting him get near that girl, and I'm not letting you hide for the rest of your life." She shook her head fiercely. "You don't understand. He has people. He has money. He has connections. And so do I," Enrique cut in. "Actually, more than he does. And different from his." He leaned closer. "You're not alone anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again." That broke her. Her last defenses finally crumbled, and she cried harder. The kind of crying someone does when hope hurts more than despair. Enrique wiped her face gently with his hands. "We're getting you out of this," he said. "I promise." And in that soaked, dark alley, surrounded by fear and tragedy, something shifted forever. Enrique stopped being a bystander. He became part of her fight. The question wasn't who she was anymore. The question became, how would he save both of them, the broken woman and the child clinging to her for life? The rain was easing, but the world still weighed heavily on her shoulders. With every breath, the woman seemed smaller, weaker, and yet more terrified than ever. Enrique didn't hesitate. He took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders, not out of pity, out of respect. "Come on," he said. "We can't stay here." She looked around like a cornered animal, someone who had lived so long watching shadows that she no longer knew how to exist without fear. "I can't go with you," she muttered. "He'll follow you. He'll find you. "I'm not afraid of him," Enrique said, steady and certain. She shook her head, voice breaking. "But I am. Not for me, for the girl." She didn't say the girl's name. She didn't need to. Enrique took a long breath. "Then let's make sure she's safe first." They walked fast through the wet streets, avoiding alleys, passing empty sidewalks and silent corners. The storm had chased everyone indoors, leaving the city cold and half asleep. He could hear her breathing, shallow, panicked, protective. After a few blocks, she turned toward an abandoned building with peeling walls and broken windows. A place no one would ever check, perfect for hiding, terrible for living. She pushed open a side door and slipped inside. Enrique followed. The hallway smelled of mold and rust. But deeper inside, a faint light glowed behind a makeshift door made of boards and blankets. She knocked softly. "It's just you, right?" came a small voice from the other side. The woman's expression broke into a trembling smile. "It's me, sweetheart." The door opened, and the girl appeared, wide-eyed, scared, relieved. She ran into the woman's arms with a force that showed exactly how much fear she'd been holding. "I missed you," the girl whispered, pressing her face against the woman's stomach. "I missed you too," the woman said, trying not to cry again. Enrique watched the scene silently, and for the first time, he understood something deeper. She wasn't protecting a life. She was protecting hope, the only hope she had left. The girl finally looked at Enrique, wary. "Who's he?" The woman stroked the girl's hair and answered carefully. "He's someone who helped us today." The girl studied him from head to toe, deciding whether she could trust him. Enrique forced a gentle smile. "Hi." She didn't reply, just hid behind the woman again. The little home was nothing more than a corner cleaned with care. A thin mattress, 2 boxes as a table, a lantern hanging by a wire, a neatly folded blue blanket. Enrique swallowed hard. Even with almost nothing, everything had been arranged with love. "Come with me," Enrique said softly. "Both of you. Right now." The woman shook her head. "We can't. If we're out there and he shows up, it's over." "And here is safer?" Enrique countered. She bit her lip. Enrique moved closer. "Look at me," he said. "You trusted me in that alley. Trust me now. I have an apartment 15 minutes from here. Security at the entrance, locked doors, cameras, no one in, no one out, no one touches you there." Her breath caught. Fear fought with hope in her eyes. The girl looked up at the woman, waiting for the answer as if her entire life depended on that one moment. The woman drew in a deep breath. Enrique saw everything in her face, the conflict, the fear, the urge to run, the trauma, and something slowly shifting inside her. "And after that?" she asked softly. "When he finds out where you live?" Enrique smiled, not arrogantly, but with a new kind of resolve in his eyes. "He won't find anything, and even if he tried, he wouldn't get close, because I don't fight alone. And more importantly, I don't let anyone I protect fall." The words hit both fragile hearts inside that room. The girl tightened her hold on the woman's hand. "I want to go." The woman closed her eyes, defeated by the one request she could never deny. "Okay," she whispered. Enrique nodded, relieved. "Let's go." The walk to the apartment was silent, tense, but safe. Enrique scanned every corner, every shadow, every movement. The woman held the girl's hand with a grip so strong it looked like fear had fused their fingers together. When they arrived, the doorman recognized Enrique instantly. "Good evening, Mr. Vasconcelos." "Good evening," Enrique replied. "They're with me." The doorman nodded, unfazed. Enrique was known for being private, but never cold. They took the elevator up. The girl stared at everything with wide, amazed eyes. The clean walls, the soft lights, the polished buttons. The woman, however, trembled. "I don't belong here," she murmured. Enrique looked at her. "You belong anywhere you're safe, and here you are." When they stepped inside the apartment, the soft lighting washed over the living room. The girl ran straight to the window, stunned by the view of the city from above. The woman stayed at the door, unable to move. Enrique walked toward her. "No one will hurt you here." She inhaled and stepped inside. A small step for the world, but a giant one for someone whose life had been ripped away. Enrique set out clean towels, comfortable clothes, prepared the guest bed, and placed food on the table. The girl sat on the couch, looking around like she had stepped into a dream. The woman watched everything, overwhelmed. I don't know how to thank you," she said. Enrique shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to rest, both of you." She hesitated. "Enrique," she whispered, calling him by his name for the first time. "And if he comes after us?" Enrique met her eyes with steady certainty. "If he comes after you, he'll have to get through me first." She closed her eyes, not out of fear, but out of relief. And that night, in an apartment she never imagined she'd step into, She and the girl slept in safety, for the first time in years. And Enrique, sitting in the hallway guarding the door, realized he had found something more valuable than any fortune, a purpose, and he wasn't going to waste it. The night dragged on slowly, but for the first time in a long time, it passed in peace. Enrique didn't sleep. He stayed seated in the corridor, leaning against the wall, guarding the door like he was protecting a treasure. Every sound in the building, every distant step, woke his senses, not out of fear, but out of a responsibility deeper than anything he had ever felt. When the sun finally crept between the buildings, painting the windows orange, the guest room door opened slowly. The girl stepped out first, messy hair, sleepy eyes. She looked at Enrique and whispered, "You stayed awake all night?" Enrique laughed softly. "Looks like I did." She walked up to him. For a second, he thought she would say something skeptical, unsure, but instead, she rested her head on his shoulder with the quiet trust of someone who had finally found a safe place. The tiny, silent gesture went straight through him. He placed a gentle hand on her hair. "You can sleep a little more if you want. You're safe here." She lifted her face, gave him the faintest real smile he had ever seen, and went back to the room. A moment later, the woman appeared at the doorway. She wore the clean clothes Enrique had left for her. It was like seeing a new version of her, or maybe the old version resurfacing beneath all the scars. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I didn't need to," he answered. "You were here." She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. In the quiet of the morning, no rain, no danger, no shadows, she finally seemed to let a bit of peace seep into her chest. And that's when Enrique knew he had to say what had been sitting in him since the night before. "Listen," he began carefully, "I'm not letting that man touch you, or the girl. I promise." She inhaled sharply. "You talk like it's easy." "It's not," he admitted. "But I have resources. I have influence. I have people I trust. And more than all of that, I have the will." She looked at him, searching for lies, pity, sympathy, but found only truth. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help someone like me?" Enrique stood. "Because no one helped you when they should have. Because you saved a child who wasn't yours. Because you care for people on the streets who don't even know your name. Because you gave your last piece of bread to a girl you barely knew." He ran a hand through his hair, heart tight. "Because you still have the courage to love," he said quietly, "even after the world tried to rip that out of you." He breathed deeply, the weight of everything pressing against his chest. "And because what you lived through could have destroyed anyone, but you're still here." The woman brought a trembling hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the tears, but they came anyway. Enrique stepped closer and took her hands scarred, worn, marked by years of survival. "You're not a nobody," he said softly. "You never were, and I'll prove that to you." She closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I would be too," he said. "But fear doesn't stop us from fighting. You're the strongest person I've ever met." For the first time, she smiled, small, fragile, but alive. As the days passed, Enrique started moving the pieces of a battle she never thought podría vencer. He called lawyers, hired private investigators, activated people he trusted, the kind of people who didn't ask questions, only delivered results. Meanwhile, the woman and the girl stayed inside the apartment, finally eating, sleeping, breathing, living. Little by little, color returned to the girl's face. The woman began to walk without shrinking into herself. The constant fear in her eyes faded, replaced by something new, hope. And Enrique, for the first time in many years, felt something new growing inside him too. Not duty, not guilt. Something else, admiration, a quiet tenderness he didn't dare name yet. He saw in her a courage most powerful people he knew didn't possess. He saw dignity where the world only saw ruin. He saw strength where others saw weakness. And he saw love, a love so pure for that little girl that it barely seemed real. Protecting them stopped feeling like an obligation. It became something instinctive, natural. Weeks later, the man who hunted her was located. Files opened. Evidence emerged. Buried testimonies resurfaced. Enrique had said he would fight, and he fought. And on the day the authorities confirmed his arrest, the woman collapsed into Enrique's arms, sobbing like someone who could finally breathe after years drowning in fear. "It's over," she repeated. "It's over." Enrique held her tightly. "It's over," he said. "And now, your life begins." And now, this is where I pause. Because this is the moment when you, who stayed with this story until now, become part of it too. If you made it this far, it means some part of this story touched your heart. Maybe the fear, maybe her strength, maybe his gesture, maybe the fight for justice. And every comment, every like, every share helps this channel keep bringing stories like this. Stories that make us think, that inspire us, that remind us that even in pain there is light. So now I'm asking you truly, comment below what moved you the most in this story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Like this video so it can reach even more people. Your interaction makes all the difference for this work to continue. And remember, there are people who, even shattered, still manage to save others. And there are others who appear at the exact moment to save those who no longer have any strength left. Thank you for watching. And see you in the next story.